now that we've had a chance to really dive into potential visions, I want to bring in online two women who need no introduction, who will also be able to share their visions and discuss in more detail what do we really need to do to move towards that collective action. So join me in welcoming Vandana Shiva, Indian scholar, ecofeminist, editor, author, the list goes on, and Ayisha Siddiqa, co-founder of Polluters Out. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you? Can you see us, hear us?
Hello.
Brilliant. Okay, can we start off perhaps with Ayisha? Can you tell us what is your vision for Earth?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and not just having me, but in the presence of Dr. Shiva. I'm really honored to be here. So, in order to answer this question, I have to go back to the root with which I started my activism. And I wanted to share a poem with you because this is where my vision for the world is more or less materialized. And the poem is called on another panel about climate change. They ask me to solve the future, and all I've got is a love poem. So it goes something like this. What if the future is soft and revolution is so kind that there is no end to us in sight? Whole cities breathe and bad luck is bested by a promise to the leaves. To withstand your own end is difficult. The future frolics about, promise to no one, as is her right. Rage against injustice makes the voice grow harsher yet. If the future leaves without us, the silence that will follow will be an unspeakable nothing. What if we convince her to stay? How rare and beautiful it is that we exist. What if we stun existence one more time? When I wake up, get out of bed, my 7-year-old cousin with her ruptured belly tags along. Then follows my grandmother, aunts, my other cousins, and the violent shape of their drinking water. The earth remembers everything. Our bodies are the color of the earth, and we're nobodies, been born from so many apocalypses. What's one more? Love is still the only revenge. It grows each time the earth is set on fire. But for what it's worth, I'd do this again. Gamble on humanity 100 times over. Commit to life onto life as the trees fall and take us with them. I'd follow love into extinction. Thank you. I will pass it on to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Ayisha. We can feel you and your words in this room here. Thank you for sharing them. Dr. Vandana, can you tell us, building on that too, you've been around for a while, you've been sharing what you feel needs to be done. For right now, what do you see as your new vision for Earth?
My vision for Earth today, in the middle of the threatened collapse, is the same vision with which I started my ecological life 50 years ago. And the vision is that the Earth is living, and we need to get out of the illusion that she's just dead matter for extraction and exploitation for the next round and the next round and the next round. And as the living Earth, she carries these solutions. After all, she brought the temperature down from 270 degrees to 13 degrees over 4 billion years. Carbon dioxide down from 98% to 0.03%. 4,000 parts per million to 250 parts per billion. And of course, in the last 200 years of fossil fuel and 100 years of oil, we've been messing it up. But we don't look to the oil civilization and the billionaires and the big tech barons for the solutions because they are looking for the next wave of super profits. We turn towards the earth, we turn towards indigenous people, we turn towards the young, we turn towards women. And learning from the earth all the work of the Landscape Forum, of regenerating biodiversity, of agriculture, forestry, of pastoralism. Here is the promise, because my work in Navdanya over these last 3.5 decades shows that we have the power with the earth of limiting the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees and drawing down to 32 to 34 gigatons that need to be drawn down through the miracle of life on this planet, through photosynthesis in every green leaf, taking the carbon dioxide and the free energy of the sun and giving us abundant food and all our needs and the oxygen we breathe. And in that little mycorrhizal fungi in the soil that grows when we take care of the earth is my understanding of democracy, of self-organized, decentered freedom of the last being on this planet, the last human being, the last child, the last woman. 13 gigatons, it has the potential to draw out 36% of the emissions through these wonderful fungi that need a good habitat to be able to grow, feed the plants, and feed humans. We live in a miracle. My vision of the earth is to understand scientifically what that miracle is about and live according to the laws of the earth, the laws of living systems.
Thank you. So we're going to keep both speakers on to discuss a bit more, because there's a lot that you've just given us. The question running in my mind is, in crisis, who do you turn to? In Ayisha, you said, those whom you love, those who have ancestral wisdom and have practiced, those who are succeeding in managing crisis, or potentially you look at the miracles and find hope and inspiration and new insight in them. We just heard from scientist, a funder, a government official, that we clearly need to kind of repurpose systems, institutions, structures. There's different ways you could go about that, working on your piece of the puzzle, changing policies. But I'm also reflecting on, we started this plenary with a spoken word piece from Gray Oletsa, who said, "We crawl like newborns." And so I'm thinking of us having this huge challenge, but also feeling like we're crawling like newborns. And I want to get your insight into, the gap between the scale of the problem. We feel like we know what we need to do. We as a collective, those who we love, those who have the insights, we need to move in a unified direction. And yet we're still a bit like newborns. Dr. Vandana, maybe because you've been around for a while, can you give us some insight into how your perspectives may be evolving on this issue? Are we still newborns?
Well, as a 70-year-old, I say that I wouldn't be able to do the work I do over this long period of time, half a century now, without being a newborn every day. A newborn willing to learn, go deeper into the fact that the more biodiversity we protect and intensify, the more food we grow. Our research is showing that we could feed 2 times the world's population by protecting biodiversity rather than wiping it out. So we have to be newborns in going out of the dystopia of the monoculture of the mind that has brought us to this crisis, and living on a daily basis as newborns in a living world full of biodiversity as part of that web of life, as part of that biodiversity. Yeah, we are newborns.
I love that. Finding power in that, finding new insight in that lens, instead of assuming perhaps that we're all such great experts with all the answers. Ayisha, I want to turn to you. What are your thoughts here?
I know I started the panel with a poem, and I probably said a lot of purple prose. But for practicality, as an activist myself, and now somebody that is working at the intergovernmental system, the question of whether we are newborns, sometimes as a young activist, or the idea that that at least policy and the governmental space is infantilized, is something very difficult to get behind. Particularly because as it was referred to before, the issue of fossil fuel proliferation, the issue of using land for the purposes of single crop agriculture, all of these issues have been identified for decades now. And as somebody who has been working deeply within the intergovernmental system, I also know that the COPs are older than I am. The negotiations are older than I am. The dialogues are older than I am. And they are going in a circular pattern. And so there is a part of life that one has to live in a manner where one notices the beauty and life of it, just to stay sane. But there's a dichotomy to this, which I don't think should be applied equally to people who have been working towards the climate issue for decades now, because I think there's with all due respect, a career built around keeping the issue alive so folks can keep their positions and not solve said issue. And we can definitely go into deeper into all of the different ways this is manifesting. In the grand scheme of things, humanity is indeed a very young species. And if the science tells us anything during our time on planet Earth, we've caused a great deal more damage than any species to come before us. But at the same time, I think because we are a miracle of a species with the ability to figure out what problems we are creating, we also have the ability to solve those problems in lightning speed too. It's not like we are incapable, and so I would really present that as the opposite end of looking at this vision to get to a place where we are indeed at a 1.5 degree world as opposed to a 3 degree world.
I really appreciate your reflection on kind of the vested interests that come into play. Because often, we talk about the systems, but I'm not sure we talk enough about how they work and interact within us as well. And so, there is that concept where you go to kind of into the organization to change it, and you come out and the organization's changed you. And so I think it's important that we constantly reflect as kind of activists, practitioners, whatever the case is, we're all part of this system, and there's an immense amount of power that we maybe have been asleep to, that we have in changing the dynamics and the forces that are at play within these structures and these institutions. We only have a few minutes left. I appreciated your point, Ayisha, in the beginning, that you're asked to come to these panels and dig out some hope in a time that is not feeling so positive. I don't want to ask that from you, but I do want to understand what your final words or advice would be to everyone, both in this room and the thousands that are online, who are, understanding analytically and technically the issues that we have. But as you mentioned, we've been having those conversations for a long time. What would you, tell us to do? How would we open our minds in a different way today?
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything novel, actually, but I know that the GLF is taking place in Nairobi, and African states and African governments have been enduring the brunt of the climate crisis, and for that reason, it's an appeal to the people in the room, more than it is an appeal to the G20 countries and the G7 countries, and that is, we need to end the era of fossil fuel. We have 6 years to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming, and that really does mean thinking about our economic systems differently. That really does mean thinking about our energy systems differently, and in massive investing in renewable energies. But at the same time, this fight and this dialogue that the developing world keeps having, which is that we need to proliferate oil and gas in order to meet the colonizer world's ability to be as economically stable as they are, is going to run out. that stance is not going to serve us after another 15 years. Yes, the developed world needs time. And I say this as a Pakistani, the developed world needs time to meet the developing world needs time to meet the developed world. But at the same time, the new oil and gas infrastructure is taking place in the global south. The massive energy projects that are allowing fossil fuel proliferation are taking place in the global south, and we need bravery from our governments to say no to these things and to put in place measures where they ensure not just the destruction of the species in our diverse habitats, but also ensure that in totality, we as a species are able to thrive 100 years from now. And I think as an activist, it's been really, really unfortunate seeing the global south governments and the global south countries that we heavily advocate for at the international space, making the decisions that will put their own citizens at risk, and then planet Earth at risk, and lastly, future generations at risk. So last few words are the era of fossil fuel needs to come to an end very soon.
Yeah, so set your sights on something different. I appreciate that. Final words from you, Dr. Vandana.
Yeah, so, I'm trained in quantum physics and quantum theory, but I spent the last 40 years looking at agriculture, particularly fossil agriculture, which has caused devastation, 90% of the species destruction, birds, the insects, the plants, 75% of the soil and water destruction, 75% chronic diseases. That same systems that making the earth sick is making us sick. So getting oil out of our economies, but getting oil out of our food is the first step. And as I mentioned earlier, we grow more food, we grow healthier food, we regenerate the earth. We can meet both the climate targets and abolish hunger, and the second SDG, the zero hunger. We can reach it by working with the earth, respecting her laws, respecting her limits. And what I've learned over these many years is we've got so used to thinking that life begins in largeness. No, that little crawling child was a fetus. And then it becomes the adults that we are walking around. Life begins in the small. And the life of the soil with billions of soil organisms, the diversity of plants, and the life in our gut, the 100 trillion microbes that are us, that tells us that the small in coherence, beginning with the tiniest molecule and the tiniest cell, is the beginning of life. That's why our work must begin in communities, as the Landscape Forum is about, as my work in building community seed banks, community agriculture, community economies, living economies. We, as brilliant species, have this capacity. As a young species, can learn from our ancestors who have been around 99.9%. Other species, but we can learn from the women, we can learn from the indigenous people, we can learn from the peasants. It's all there for us to practice, but we must set a target that by 2030, we get oil out of our food system to meet the food needs of the people and the planetary needs of a stable climate.
Thank you so much. Can I get a round of applause for our incredible dialogue with you both? I wish we could discuss this for longer. You are two people who I've been really grateful to be in conversation with. You've left us with so much to think about, both personally, both in when it comes to the issues and the solutions that we should focus on. I'm resonating with the idea that, you can't leave economics with the economists, and that we all need to be part of building this new economy and this new vision for Earth. Thank you for being with us.